Yeah, my name's Fiona Brennickmeyer, and I'm a Institute of Functional Medicine certified practitioner and integrated sports nutritionist. I also see a lot of weight loss patients, and I specialize in sports nutrition. So I often am working with athletes to make weight for specific sporting goals or competitions. Maybe they're wanting to increase in muscle mass but decrease body fat, so this becomes a little bit more specific. So yeah, that's sort of my role, as well as generalized weight loss.
Over to you guys.
Dr. Faryal. Okay, thank you. My name is Dr. Faryal Luhar. I'm a naturopathic doctor and been in practice for 16, 17 years. And yes, weight loss is a never dying, constant concern that all of us have. I use natural therapies, natural medicines. A lot of what I do is rooted in functional medicine. And we're always looking to uncover the root cause of what is happening. So weight gain, which we will discuss, is a consequence. And there's something else happening at a deeper level. Mostly though, I see women for this issue. And I think that there is a distinction to be made between weight gain in women and the strategies that women use compared to men. They cannot be treated the same because their biology is completely different.
Yeah, I'm Tina Shagouri. I'm a clinical dietitian. I'm a health behavior educator. I've been practicing clinical nutrition for the past, I don't know, 20 years maybe. In Dubai, I've been practicing for the past 16 years. And yes, definitely, weight loss is always the #1 reason why people visit dietitians. I do consult with children as well, children, teenagers, adults. Normally, same thing. We get women is definitely our main focus, but we do have lots and lots of success stories with men as well. So we're going to discuss that in a minute. But yeah, I'm very happy to be here today and to get the chance to discuss not the traditional calories in, calories out kind of discussion today. We're going to have a completely different approach to weight loss. And I hope, I know from the participants, there are many that are actually practitioners as well, dietitians and health practitioners. So I hope they will also benefit from, you know, the approach that we will describe, all of us, and, you know, how we will tackle the issue.
Thanks, guys. So yeah, no, so quite a broad range of experience, and I just want to sort of pick up from that point that you made regarding kind of calories in, calories out. So, you know, one of the first things I ask all my clients when they come to see me is, how do you think you lose weight? And, you know, I near enough, you know, probably 99% of the time get greeted with the same response. Well, you know, it's pretty easy. It's as a concept, it's just eat less. You know, maybe eat a little bit cleaner, whatever cleaner is, and exercise more. But then when I phrase it in a different way, and I say to the client, well, okay, think of it this way. Let's just assume, or, you know, it's widely accepted that a pound of fat, let's say, is roughly 3,500 calories. So let's just say I'm designed to burn 2,000 calories a day for the sake of argument. I mean, that's controversial in itself. And so, you know, if I want to lose weight, I decide to cut my calories by 350 calories a day. So every 10 days, I'm going to lose a pound of fat. So over the course of a year, 365 days, I'm going to lose 36.5 pounds of fat. Does that actually happen in reality? Well, very few of us have that experience. And that's where people get lost. So where does this concept of, you know, calories in, calories out, just eating less, exercise more, come from? Because it sounds extremely logical, but, you know, no one questions it for that very reason. But why is it that everyone fails? Because if it was that easy, then, you know, people wouldn't come to us, you know, having dieted for years, rebounded with their weight, and then they're left kind of metabolically broken. So, you know, with anything in healthcare or wellness or medicine, you know, one has to look at the evidence. So, you know, no one ever talks about you know, has this been studied? You know, what has experience told us? Well, you know, it's actually been studied for over a century. And so then what does the scientific evidence tell us about eat less, exercise more? Well, I'll tell you.
Sorry, Dr. Nas, I don't want to interrupt. If you just give a nudge to your camera, it's blurry a bit. We see
Sorry.
you, yeah. Yeah, maybe the...
Sorry, guys.
Okay, that's better.
Oh,
Yeah, that's much
Okay.
better. Yeah.
Probably because I like moving my head. It's trying to focus on me.
Yeah, probably.
So we're talking about, you know, what is the evidence? Well, you know, we'll talk a little bit about that. And, you know, I'm just going to pick out a couple of studies out of hundreds of studies that have been done over the last 100 years. So there was actually a very well-known one called the Women's Health Initiative. It was done in 2003, and they studied over 50,000 people, and it was done over 7 years. Equally, there was a diabetes prevention program study, same sort of level, same number of people, 2012, and they did a 10-year follow-up. And they pretty much concluded exactly the same thing, exactly the same conclusion that all these other studies have concluded. It's that low-calorie diets combined with increased exercise don't work in the long term. Now, people may say, actually, that's not true. One study showed this one. In reality, if the study goes on long enough, these people always rebound and often end up heavier than when they started. And the failure rate is 99%. Okay, so why is it that this approach remains the kind of favored advice amongst not just, you know, lay people, it's trainers, it's dietitians, it's doctors, it's specialists in weight loss are still running clinics telling people to just eat less and exercise more. Now, you know, we spend so much time obsessing about the calories in part of the equation, but no one actually considers calories out. And so again, what do the studies actually show us? Well, as far back as 1917, this is more than 100 years ago. This was demonstrated.
Yeah.
We're over 100 years down the line, and people are still unfortunately not aware of this. You know, experiments showed that your total energy expenditure, the amount that your body burns, decreases when you're dieting, and hence you're going to compensate. There was actually, you know, there was a meta-analysis in 91. A meta-analysis is a study of a number of different studies looking at trends between them. This one looked at 29 studies, and it showed that your basal metabolic rate, and for those who don't know, your basal metabolic rate is the baseline of energy that you burn just to stay alive without kind of doing anything else other than breathing and having your heartbeat, showed that your basal metabolic rate can decrease by 25% in response to caloric restriction.
Yeah.
Now, it doesn't end there. The opposite is also true, which people don't realize, is that if you're metabolically well and functioning properly, you can increase the amount you're eating, and over time, your metabolism will increase. And people, you know, in certain societies, you know, over the periods of time have been eating 4,500 calories plus, yet it's only in the last generation that, you know, people have started to put weight on. And so, you know, I want people to sort of consider the statement, you know, on the lines of cutting calories. If you were to reduce your calories by 500 calories a day and you continued that for the rest of your life, well, you're eventually going to run out of energy and you're going to weigh nothing. Well, quite clearly that doesn't happen. And at some point the body must reduce caloric expenditure. And it turns out that the adaptation to that happens very quickly. Not only does it happen very quickly, it actually persists in the long term. And, you know, the thing is that calorie counting for weight loss assumes that we can easily and consciously control both the calories in through the food choices and the calories out through exercise. However, both calories in and calories out are largely under unconscious control. I just want people to think about that. You know, it's not us deciding how much we eat and how much, you know, we burn by exercising. Yeah. It's actually the hormones that determine how much we're eating and how much we're burning. We can decide not to eat, but we can't decide not to be hungry. Similarly, you can decide to exercise, but you can't decide to increase your metabolic rate. And
good point, actually.
I'm just going to, at this point, just bring in a slide just to try and help that resonate with the audience. So most of us, or most of you will have heard of the show in the US, I think it's now being shown all over the world, called The Biggest Loser, where these are people who are super obese. They're on the show, I'm not sure the length of time, and a number of months. And these are people who are given really intensive input. The personal trainers, psychologists, dietitians, doctors. And they actually did an experiment where they took season 8 in 2009 and followed 14 of the contestants. And not only did they followed them 6 years after the competition. And what was really interesting was 13 out of 14 contestants regained all that weight, and 4 of them actually ended up heavier than when they started the competition. Similarly, at the same time, when they looked at their basal metabolic rate, some of these people were consuming burning 800 fewer calories a day than when they started the competition. So just a really clear example of how when people are taking a traditional approach, are fighting against their body's own physiology. You know, there is an assumption that when people fail in a diet that, you know, they've fallen off the bandwagon, they've got no discipline. It can be further from the truth. You're fighting against inbuilt mechanisms that have been designed to keep us alive. And, you know, the fact that the body is so sophisticated, and something like energy compartmentalization, the way we burn energy, I would rank it alongside procreation as probably the 2 most important aspects of our survival on this planet. And we, in the 21st century, are still assuming that weight preservation is just about calories in, calories out. When you think about it from an abstract perspective, is, you know, an extremely, not only simplified way of looking at it, it's just completely wrong. So, you know, I've been talking too much right now. I'm gonna bring my colleagues in at this stage now. You know, I'm going to gently introduce into Dr. Farial. We've set the scene. We've said that it's not calories in, calories out. We've mentioned hormones. Can you just give us a kind of rundown on exactly what those hormones are?
Yeah, sure. Before I do that, though, I just would like to touch on one of the things that you mentioned, Dr. Naz, which is so true about the calories in, calories out. With this misnomer or this myth out there that all calories are created equal, you know, food is information. And I think that's another thing that's the missing link here, is that there's a big difference between 100 calories of almonds and 100 calories of chocolate cookies or chips, right? It's not giving the same information to the body. And in many cases, if we're eating foods like processed foods, sugars, you know, inflammatory foods, we're basically setting ourselves up to keep that inflammatory cascade going. And fat cells are actually organs. I mean, I don't know if our viewers can appreciate that, you know, fat is an endocrine organ. It is producing its own set of hormones, and it is continuously perpetuating the inflammatory molecules. So it's really important to distinguish between the quality of the food that you're eating and the information that food is sending to our genes, sending to our detox systems, you know, to all of the organ systems. The other thing that I think is something very important that you mentioned about basal metabolic rate is that as we get older, our BMI naturally, our metabolic rate naturally decreases by between, I would say, 8 to 10% every year or every few years. So again, as I said before, you know, I'm seeing a lot more women, and a lot more women after the age of 40 in particular, where we're already seeing this influx of hormonal disruptions, along with the fact that the BMIs, their metabolic rate, which is what is helping them to burn, is decreasing also naturally. So if it goes to starving yourself and decreasing your calories and just focusing on calories in, calories out, it's really a disaster. Another thing was the big loser slide that you put up, which was it's quite powerful because nobody's looking at, well, what is the root cause of the weight gain? And it's always a thorn in my side when I see shows like this, and the solution is bariatric surgery, right? Let's just go in and let's just staple up the stomach, or, make it half its size or it's quarter of its size, and everything is fine after that. And there are so many other psychological components and lifestyle components that are not addressed. So it's really, really quite interesting. So when we talk about weight gain, I just wanted to connect the dots a little bit because it is complex. It is not a simple situation. And from a naturopathic point of view, and for all of us that work together here, we excel at really looking at each person's individual biology. So everybody who comes in complaining of weight gain is not going to be treated the same way, because each person's biochemistry, their genetics, the way they deal with stress, whether they're getting enough sleep, how much movement they're getting, all of these things are going to play a role, and we have to look at all of that. And so for me, I always look at hormones, because there are a few hormones that are definitely implicated and are a huge component when we look at people who are gaining, and they think they're doing everything in their power to do this. They think they're eating well, they think they're eating less. They've spoken to this person, and they've spoken to all these people for whom doing these things seemingly have worked. They're definitely over-exercising. One of the biggest things that I really try to get people to understand is if you're waking up at 5 a.m. to go work out because you think that weight training is so important, which it is, but if you're doing it at the expense of your sleep, this is a problem. And this is another thing that we need to address, is that sleep is not this impartial activity. There's so much going on there in relation to your metabolism and detox. And basically, it resets. It's a chance for the body to reset hormones. So what are some of the big players, right, when we talk about hormones? Thyroid, for sure. So thyroid is the butterfly-shaped organ. It sits, right here at the base of the neck. And we're seeing more and more and more people, presenting with especially low thyroid, hypothyroidism, and even autoimmune thyroid conditions. And we did a webinar, I think it was last month, just on thyroid. So, certainly you can you watch that again. It was I think, very insightful. And so the thyroid is the intelligence center of the body, according to me, and it is what is responsible for how our body uses energy. It is the center that determines, how quickly you're metabolizing and using energy that's coming in the form of food. So if you've got a sluggish thyroid, it's going to impact your metabolism, and that's going to cause you to gain weight. So really important to make sure that you have had a thyroid check, a full thyroid panel, and other symptoms. If you're starting to lose your hair, if you're starting to feel constipated, you're starting to have negative moods, low moods, depression, even anxiety, the weight gain, any other thyroid symptoms, right? It's important to check what's happening there. All of these hormones, by the way, they all talk to each other. There's an interplay between all the different hormones. And when I treat the thyroid, I always treat the adrenal glands. So the adrenal glands are the glands that sit on top of the kidneys that release stress hormones, which leads us to the next one on the list here, cortisol.
So you raise a number of interesting points there, and I think the thing that I find when we're doing testing on people, and the hormone that most people are unaware of is the cortisol, the stress hormone, and you kind of delved in a little bit, kind of how changes in lifestyle, or or maybe not, someone who's not sleeping effectively, maybe putting stress hormones up. Can you just give people a little bit of an insight how that works?
Sure. So cortisol is a survival hormone. We absolutely need cortisol to survive and to function well. We want cortisol, but we want it to be there in healthy amounts at the time that it's needed. We don't want cortisol to be surging through our system all the time, because this is the perfect setup for, again, just creating more and more fat storage. And so basically the way cortisol works is it works on a circadian rhythm. Circadian means in relation to sleep-wake. day-night cycles. We have a lot of hormones that work this way. And so basically when you're sleeping, the body is replenishing, filling the tank again. And you have to sleep well for this to happen. You have to get into the different 4 stages of sleep in order to actually replenish and fill your tank. And in the morning, cortisol levels should be their highest. And as the day goes along, they should start to decline over the day as the body's using the cortisol. But we're seeing more and more people who, when you can actually measure cortisol through salivary testing at 4 points in the day is what we usually do here. And we can see that the curve is not normal. It is erratic, it's up and down, or it's completely flat. Mm-hmm. And this is where we're talking about burnout, fatigue, if your cortisol output in relation to ongoing stress is not being addressed, meaning you're in a fight or flight mode all the time. Back in the day, as you said, the way we were built from an evolutionary point of view was we're gonna be faced with a predator, a tiger or a bear, and we either fight it or we flee from it. Mm-hmm. Well, today's tiger or bear is what? Emails, job demands, life demands, social media, pandemic, economic stressors, and the whole time we're not giving the body a chance to recover from that stress, which is what used to happen in the past. So I don't know if you want to add a bit more to that. And then maybe.
Yeah, no, I think you nicely covered it. But I also kind of want to put it into sort of perspective. I want to sort of personalize it for people by just explaining the sort of clients that come to us, because we seem to get the people who have tried an approach or a number of different approaches actually over years and had that typical yo-yo sort of dieting, and they're really at the end of their tether. It's they've come to us as a sort of last resort before they're considering something like surgery. And the typical story is that I'm eating very little. These are generally very well informed people. They're eating healthy in a traditional sense if you're looking at kind of macronutrients. They may even be training regularly, have personal trainers, often nowadays doing high intensity training, and really can't understand what's happening. And it's about putting as much weight, as you said, on things like emotional stress, and then something like sleep deprivation is probably the most physically stressful demand on the body, and usually the two go hand in hand. I think it's important also to mention that that severe caloric deprivation, if you're not meeting the energy demands of your body, is going to put your stress hormones up. So paradoxically, we tell majority of our clients that they need to start eating more and exercising less, because they've actually been burning the candle at both ends. And don't we? I mean, Tina, we work very closely, and we're often telling clients to. We don't even count calories. We just think they're irrelevant actually to the equation. Yeah. As long as you're eating the right foods and eating intuitively, we're telling people to eat more.
And Dr.
There's other dynamics to it, and often telling people to scale back on their training and actually do just brisk walking.
And you have to see the look, maybe some meditation. You have to see the look on their face when
they actually start to lose the weight. So to get to that stage, though, we actually do some testing, don't we? And the testing is really based around the hormones that Dr. Farrell, you've been talking about, because unless we actually know what's going on inside that individual, how can we give them a plan that's going to work for them? Because one individual may genuinely have an issue with their insulin, that they're eating too frequently, they're eating the wrong foods. Right. Then you're going to have a certain plan for that individual. Well, that's going to be different to the next person who's highly stressed and sleeping 3 hours of the day, yet actually is eating very well and is already doing some intermittent fasting. So I think it's just to make people realize, and I know people intuitively know this, that it's not a one size fits all. Yes, there are general principles that apply to everyone, but unless we really drill it down and find out what's going on inside, it's very difficult to to come up with a plan. Fiona, what's you know, I'm going to bring in your slide now. So tell us a little bit about that approach.
The functional medicine approach is really looking at somebody as a holistic being, that we're not just...
Fiona, can you just raise your voice a tiny bit? We can't hear it properly.
That there are 5 pillars for optimum health, and if one of those is out of balance, that can cause issues which may be the trigger for weight gain or not being able to lose weight. And this is also for athletes that I see. So one of the big ones, I mean, the lion's share is nutrition, we work on naturally, but all these other things also are absolutely essential. So sleep and relaxation, as Dr. Nass is already talking about, that we have to optimize our sleep. We need to make sure we've got relaxation in there. You know, maybe somebody's really working lots of hours and not having very much need time or downtime. So it's really important to increase that. And then exercise and movement, making sure that we're moving. I often see people and they're doing 1 hour of exercise a day and they think that's absolutely, you know, they're getting their
It's
exercise.
mostly cardio, by the way, right?
The rest of the day. And there's been a lot of studies that show that actually that is in itself very detrimental. We need to be moving. So just getting up and walking around the room, you know, either in your office or if you're working from home at the moment, it's makes it almost easier. And trying to find situations where you can just add in little bits to keep moving, because it's not just the calories out. That's not really the part of it. It's also for our well-being, because when we move, when we exercise, we produce hormones that make us feel good. And also it's very important to introduce resistance exercise, as long as our cortisol, our stress levels aren't so elevated that it's going to be detrimental. We need to increase muscle mass, because as we age, muscle mass decreases, and we need to actually compensate for that. Muscle is metabolically active, fat tissue mostly is not. And then the other thing is looking at stress, as we've already been talking about, managing stress levels. I hate the word stress because people go, I'm not stressed, I'm not stressed. But I see a lot of people, and a lot of women actually, and I use the analogy that they are like the swan swimming upstream. So they look all calm and as if they're actually doing very well, but they're underneath, they've got those legs, their feet are going paddling like mad to go upstream. So they, on the outside, we think everything is fine, but actually they need support. And that's where relationships come in. It's really, really important that we have meaningful relationships and we're part of a community with like-minded people. There's also a lot of evidence to suggest that when you are in a group of people, you tend to take on the group's habits and share their values. So if you are with, if your whole group of friends are all overweight, and it's going to make it much more difficult. So you need to start to be thinking about and challenge yourself as to whether that's going to actually help you in the long run to get where you're wanting to go.
Thanks for that, Fiona. Tina, can you just sort of, I guess, again, put it into context for the attendees? I mean, how does it work with us? You know, what we do the testing. What is it that they benefit? You know, what is it? How are we assisting?
So like you all mentioned, the first thing we do is, you know, the general testing. whether it's the hormonal panel, whether it's the testing for guts, whatever, you know, it requires. We do the testing and we have the tests in front of us, and we deal with each person, like Dr. Farial mentioned, we deal with them individually. And it's very important because you know what, I get a lot of questions or a lot of people who would ask, could you please send me a diet to do this? Or could you please, you know, tell me what I should do for that? I would be happy to help whenever I can. But the problem is there is something sacred, in my opinion, about this first visit with the practitioner that defines, you know, the success, you know, for your journey.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's during that session that, first of all, the person, maybe Dr. Nas, we can put the slide. So it's basically, this is how we set the tone for the rest of the approach that we're doing. So it's very important for the practitioner to place the patient, the weight loss patient, into a phase. You know, you have, you know, I've seen thousands of people in the past 15 years. And I can tell you not two cases are the same.
Mm-hmm.
It's not only because our bodies are different and because our needs are different, it's because our readiness to change is different. You know, where we stand. Are we, you know, you get, let me take you a bit over this model. This is called the trans-theoretical model. This is used in theories of behavioral change. So basically what we do, and it's very interesting for everyone to have an idea about these stages, because when you also place yourself in one of those stages, you can help yourself better. So basically, let's start with the pre-contemplation. The pre-contemplation is that phase where you don't think you have an issue, you don't think you have a problem, you don't think you need to lose weight, and you're just not contemplating anything. Now, but you know, we're talking about people who need to lose weight. Let's say you're overweight or you're suffering from a medical condition, but you know, you don't think you need to do any action about it. Now, you move up to contemplation when you start maybe reading things, when you watch a documentary, when someone tells you this, when you feel something, a medical emergency, and then, you know, this is an alarm, you enter into the contemplation whereby you think, it looks like I need to do something about it. Let me see, let me ask around. You know, my friend did this diet, my brother went to this clinic. You start asking around. You're still at the contemplation. You haven't booked your appointment. You haven't taken any actual steps. And then your next phase, and when you're convinced of the approach that they're offering you, for instance, you go on, you log into the website of DNA, or you call your friend or whatever, and you ask how do they do it, and then, okay, you're convinced. You book your appointment. You're now in the preparation. You book your appointment at the clinic. You register in an online class, workout class, or a gym. You're in the preparation. Now, most people we see at the clinic are either in the preparation or in the action or in the maintenance. There's a lot of people that we see in the contemplation and pre-contemplation who actually come with their spouse or with their children or with someone else, and they're sitting in the consultation and they're just, you know, something, there's a bulb that lights up. Anyway, so the idea of placing our clients, our patients, into one of those stages is to be able to help them. Because I cannot approach a person who is still contemplating the same way I would approach someone who's done it 2, 3, 4 times, who's into the maintenance and relapsing, and is stuck in this, because this to me is the most difficult phase. That shift between maintenance and just keep maintaining and avoiding relapse is the whole, I mean, this is the reason, you know, if we go back to the Biggest Loser study, we see that most of these people don't have the skills to maintain their weight, because all they did was given to them. You know, the workout routine, the food, the brainwash, the whole system, nothing was acquired really. So once we placed, you know, our clients into those stages, we start helping, because to move from, let's say, preparation to action, we have to give them the skills to be able to start applying. And when I say skills, and you know, some people would think, okay, giving a menu, like a detailed menu, is so overrated and so old-fashioned, and you know, just general guidelines. You'd be surprised with the difference a simple 7-day menu does with with people. It's because this is one skill that you're giving them. You're organizing them.
Right.
You're giving them this ease of choice. Because one of the main reasons, and the reason why I'm going over this is because if I look back at the main reasons why clients or patients relapse or can't sustain a diet, the number one reason would be I got bored, or I lost my willpower. You know, we traveled and I lost my willpower, and then I spiraled back down. So this is where the dietitian or the practitioner needs to grab them and then give them the skills and then discuss, what were the difficulties? How did you try to face them? Okay, this strategy didn't work, this strategy worked. And so we put the strategies together so that the aim eventually is to move them into the maintenance and keep them into the maintenance. And this is, and now I'm going to say something very important. The reason why it's a circle, it's a cycle, is because it is a cycle. It's never linear. It's never like one step after the other, you get to maintenance, yeah, done. It's never like this. Where's the trick? The trick is to lengthen the maintenance as much as possible. There will be relapse, but there's a relapse, there's a small relapse, and there's a major relapse. We aim at creating a strategy so that this relapse is only temporarily. It doesn't affect you psychologically, and it's, you get used to it. You relapse, you get back up, and you continue. And the longer the maintenance stretches with us, the closer we get to giving you the sustainable lifestyle. But even us as practitioners, we relapse. We try, and then sometimes we fall, and then we get back up. What's the difference then between us and our clients is because we know we have a set of skills to help ourselves. And this is the set of skills that are so important to be given to our clients throughout the consultations. Why do we ask for our clients to come every 2 weeks or 4 weeks? It's just not really to weigh. Dr. Nass, you also know, we don't weigh them all the time. We don't weigh them at every visit. We don't do the weighing like it's the star of the visit. The weighing comes whenever we see obvious results and whenever the client or the patient is interested to know, okay, let's have a benchmark, let's see the difference. But the main objective of having you and seeing you, our patients or our clients regularly, is to guide you through those phases to get you to the maintenance confidently. When you're feeling confident and you're feeling like, okay, yeah, I might relapse, but guess what? I have a strategy. If I relapse, I know how to get back up. Yeah. And this, I think, is at the core. And unfortunately, Dr. Nass, you mentioned the traditional approach. I come from a traditional approach. I was taught in university in my BS, calories in, calories out. Now, obviously, I hope it has changed nowadays. But what I learned—
I don't think it has.
Well, I'm trying to change it from my side with my students. But yeah, I think the approach is this functional or behavioral approach has to be implemented because, we saw the results and we saw what the traditional calories in, calories out, deprivation, calorie cuts, high intensity training. It not only does it need to relapse, but it puts them in such a bad psychological state that these are people who create a kind of fear from dieting,
I think one of the challenges, if I can just quickly add to, is so the strategic side of it is really important because we see this all the time. Someone's doing well, and then all of a sudden they decide to, enjoy a piece of pizza or enjoy a piece of cake, and they're like, okay, that's it, I've fallen off the wagon, I'm just gonna forget about this whole thing. But there are ways of allowing yourself those little leeways. And the other thing is there's so much confusion, I'm sure you'd agree, about all the different diets out there, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Everybody, on social media is wanting to tell us which diet is the best, which approach is the best. And I get this often is, okay, can you tell me if I should do the keto diet or should I do, and this whole misconception about, low carbs, or should I do this diet or the South Beach or this or that? So I don't know if you want to speak to that, but I think that's part of the confusion.
Yeah, no, I entirely agree. And I think, Tina, you made some interesting points. The thing I remind clients is that it's one thing, the weight that you lose during the program, but the real value is the fact that we're helping people understand how weight management weight loss works, and they'll going forward have the skill set to be able to manage it themselves without us there,
Exactly.
you know, at some point in the future. You also obviously highlighted the kind of huge behavioral component to weight loss, and there's a whole area of that behavior and, you know, hurdles, etc., that, you know, we're unfortunately not covering today, but, you know, we're under no illusion that it's, you know, just a physical issue when it comes to weight loss.
Yeah.
You know, I just want to kind of also highlight, you know, practical things that everyone listening here today can do, you know, if it is something that is bothering them, or, you know, something they want to address. And as Fiona quite rightly sort of categorized it into sort of 5 pillars, you know, starting with nutrition, you know, you Dr. Fariel mentioned the interesting point about these different diets. And what's interesting is that, you know, a lot of these diets are just reincarnations and dressed slightly differently. And in fact, a lot of these diets are doing the same thing in a different way. And what's entertaining to me is that the people who design these diets have no idea why they're working, when, you know, actually it's because, you know, keto is addressing an insulin problem. But quite equally, you know, amongst other things, but quite equally, we have clients where keto doesn't work, and in fact,
Right.
actually is compounding the problem. You know, it's disrupting the thyroid, inadvertently restricting calories, which is making the metabolism slower. They're eating pro-inflammatory foods, which is creating inflammation, which is raising insulin, disrupting sleep. You begin to see how things unfold. We just don't look at things one-dimensionally, because that doesn't work. I mean, you know, everyone will know that well, certainly in this panel, that one of our go-tos and one of my passions is fasting, and, you know, we'll delve deeper into fasting. But before we get into that, I mean, what is your general advice to people regarding nutritional habits outside of the fasting? Because, yeah, they quite rightly, they'll come expecting a particular diet. I mean, how do you guys handle that? Fiona?
I tend to focus on what you can eat rather than what you can't eat. I think it's really important to really support the gut microbiome, because that has a massive impact on metabolism and digestive health and everything. So really, really increasing vegetable intake, as many vegetables as you can. Being mindful of some of the root vegetables, that you wouldn't overindulge in those, but still, most people are just not eating enough vegetables. So pack the plate with as much color as possible, alongside some real good quality protein. And I think you're not going to go far wrong if you focus on that. And yeah, keeping it simple.
I'll just add,
building on it.
I'll just add to Fiona. Yeah, I completely agree. Gut health is something we look at during the initial consultation. I also focus a lot on deficiencies. I always require that they go over their deficiencies and check if they have any vitamin D deficiency, any iron deficiency. So basically, this comes, you know, aside from what they're going to eat and not. It's very important, because sometimes a reason why they relapse or they cannot go on with the diet is fatigue. And the underlying cause of fatigue would be a major vitamin D deficiency. And I'm seeing this more and more these days. I had a client today with a vitamin D of 10 or 9, if I'm not mistaken. She was feeling so drained and so tired, and the fatigue, she was, you could see it, you know. And she's seen many practitioners for that. And unfortunately, it wasn't pinpointed that her vitamin D is extremely low. And this also plays a big role. So yes, if I have to choose one recommendation, is always make sure you are covering your deficiencies and, you know, going over the reasons, the root cause, to be able to address the food properly. So yeah, that's very, very, that's essential, I think, as well.
I think for me, along the lines of testing, I always check inflammatory markers. Because if your inflammatory markers are high, this is definitely one of the things that's contributing. And it speaks to all of the things you've all spoken about already in terms of eating inflammatory foods or living an inflammatory lifestyle. I always address mental emotional, right? So I'm always talking to people about their stress, how they deal with stress, what, like you said, Fiona, relationships, because people are stress eating and they don't know that they're stress eating. They're feeding their emotions, and they don't realize that that's what they're doing. So, you know, it's so multifactorial, and that's what's beautiful about it, because it's holistic.
Yeah. No, you're entirely right. And so I just want to come and talk about fasting, because it's actually, interestingly, it's something that probably all of our clients have now heard of and have probably tried to some degree. It seems to work well for some people, but doesn't to others. And I guess the concept of fasting, it's worth reviewing. And you know, the qualifier or the kind of analogy I use is that, well, you know, what's probably the only thing that every single major religion on this planet agrees? Well, it's that fasting at some point of the year is beneficial. And you know, that wasn't just because of the spiritual effects. They realized that there was health effects. And you know, it's really the science in the last 10 years that has shown us how effective fasting is, not just for weight loss, but for our health. Now, you know, putting it another way, I mean, if you think about it from an evolutionary perspective, we have generated the ability to store fat. And it's probably the fact that, you know, taking the example of in the summer, there's more food, there's more carbohydrates that grow, animals were probably more readily available. We fattened up until the winter when, you know, animals were hibernating and there was less vegetation. Well, we quite feasibly, during evolution, went long periods of time without food. This concept of not eating for periods of time and maybe, you know, passing out and fainting and, you know, dying at some point is actually completely unscientific. And, you know, we have these ample fat reserves, particularly if we're overweight, that will keep us running for weeks, if not months. And I think just to sort of exemplify to the audience how it actually works, well, we all kind of are aware that, you know, our immediate or primary fuel source is glucose. And, you know, when we run out of our immediate supply in the bloodstream, we have a backup as glycogen. It's stored as glycogen in the liver. And, you know, this can last up to 24 hours, just depending on how metabolically that individual is. And then when you're getting to that point, well, the body starts to use fat, its fat reserves. Now, unfortunately, because no one ever gets to that point, no one ever gets to the chance to crack into their fat reserves. Mm-hmm. And, you know, so when people come to me and they say, well, I tried intermittent fasting and it didn't work. Well, they tried what we call daily time restricted eating. So they've probably done a variation of an 8-hour eating window, 16-hour fasted. For me, I don't refer to that as intermittent fasting. For me, that is a philosophy and a way of life that until the last couple of generations, it's how we've been living. We didn't have a name for it, but we conducted our day-to-day activities during daylight hours, and that included eating. It was during a restricted time period. It just so happened that we had an extended period of fasting, and you know, it's where the term breakfast comes from. It means breaking fast, but because in the modern day population, we're getting up earlier, we're invariably in a rush, and we're having refined foods for breakfast. We're then getting back from work later and eating later. So people's food intake has become protracted. It's not only protracted, but people are eating more meals than they used to. And again, the kind of myth came about, you know, a number of decades ago that you need to eat small amounts regularly. Well, there's absolutely no scientific basis to it. So, you know, the fasting that we're employing with a lot of our clients, when appropriate, and actually most people it's appropriate, is more extended forms of fasting. And I'm talking 24 hours plus. And it's only until people actually start to do it and realize how easy and accessible and actually how beneficial it is for weight loss, but not just for weight loss, for actually general well-being, energy, sleep, focus, productivity. You know, they're just unaware that it was something that they could do, or was even not just beneficial, but the perception was that it was unhealthy. I think the important thing is also to make the distinction between starvation and fasting. The interesting thing here is that true starvation from fasting actually has the complete opposite effects from continuous caloric restriction, which is real starvation. So those hormonal mechanisms that kick in during continuous caloric restriction actually reverse during periods of fasting. And as you'll see when you get a number of days in, and I don't want to scare the audience, but it's something that we do employ to very good effect, because we're recreating a fasting feasting cycle. We are meant to cycle between, you know, a fed state and an unfed state. You know, people preserve their protein, their muscle mass, growth hormone increases, adrenaline increases. The brain starts to see all this energy coming from fat and thinks, wow, I've got this fat reserves, I'm going to speed up metabolism. So, you know, these are things that actually have been proven in the studies. And, you know, I'm more than happy for people to reach out outside of this and we can share those studies with them. But what we are saying is not, what we are talking about is not a dietary fad here. People, you know, need to realize this. This is the true science. And you know, we're employing it to very good effect. I don't know whether you guys wanted to chip in at that point on the topic of fasting.
I just want to know if you would suggest that with this cycling in and out, what about liquids?
Yeah, good point. So of course, yeah, we need to make the distinction when we're talking about fasting. We're talking purely about food fasting, and you know, the general principle is that in your fasting period, you're allowed non-caloric liquids. So you know, obviously that's water, and you know, we'll allow black tea or herbal tea or black coffee. You know, there was the common sort of bulletproof coffee that came out where people were putting doses of MCT. Again, I don't think that particularly moves the needle and disrupts the beneficial effects that you're getting from the fasting. It's whatever's going to make it sustainable for the individual. What I will say is that I don't think the semi-fast that people do on a lot of these resorts around the world mimics the same thing. So there are a lot of these juiced fasts that people do, or even locally when people say they're going on a detox and think they're doing a fast with a lot of these fruit juices. In reality, the calorie and carb or sugar intake is keeping people out of a fasted state. The trick is that, you know, to be in a fasted state, we have certain nutrient sensors, and we need to deprive these nutrient sensors to then get the weight loss and the longevity effects.
And just to add, Dr. Nas, on from a practical point of view for people who are watching, with the clients that we encountered, many of them have tried traditional dieting and, you know, either have lost some weight, but then, you know, plateaued for a few months. And the common comment I get from patients, clients after trying intermittent fasting, obviously if the first couple of days might be a bit tricky, and then by the third day they get used to it, I commonly get, I have more energy, I am more sharp, I am focusing much better, and the way I'm losing weight is very different from every other time. They can't explain how. It's just that, you know, they feel that they are maintaining their muscle mass, and I think this is one of the main assets as well. Advantages to intermittent fasting is that you don't lose your lean body mass, your muscle mass, which is one of the main culprits of losing the BMR, your basal metabolic rate, and, you know, spiraling down, is when you start losing a lot of muscles on deprivation and calorie restriction. So, and it's very important to also, like we mentioned, Dr. Nas, to have a satisfactory meal on their eating, during their eating window, and you always insist on this. And I agree with you, because the idea is not to restrict their calories and then, you know, play the trick, play the dieting game just, you know, within the intermittent fasting hours. Not at all. It's to change the mentality completely and be more intuitive and more mindful with their eating, enjoy their meal, cook their meal, you know, answer their hunger cues. We stay away as much as possible from deprivation. The only thing that they need to be mindful of and take care of is the timing, really, to conserve this fasting, you know, to conserve their what do you call it, ketosis. So it's the results are impressive. Honestly, it's an average of, I would say, 1 kilo a week on average. Sometimes more, sometimes less, depending obviously on the person. And with it, we also always recommend mild activity. We recommend strength training. And we do give them very specific, Dr. Nas gives them very specific recommendations on stress control, recommendations on sleep routine, and skills to help them sleep better, because like you said earlier, if they're doing all of this and they're not sleeping well, what's the point? You know, everything goes, you know,
I think it's just one of those strategies, right, that takes care of so many of the things we spoke about, because when you're giving your internal organs a complete vacation, they're able to reboot. It's like rebooting a computer. You're able to just reset, reboot. You know, you are more aware, like you said, you become more aware of your own body and your needs, and it also helps to just tame the inflammation, brings down the inflammation, helps to rebalance the hormones. All of the things we've discussed, I think this is one of those strategies that actually hits quite a few targets.
Yeah.
We have lots of questions, Dr. Nas. Shall we get to them before we finish? Yeah.
So first question is, tell me 4 things I can do next week to lose weight. Well, I think we've probably done fasting to death, and I'm sure there'll be a million spin-off questions as a result of that, because we could talk all day about it. Fiona, what other things? And I think it'd be probably quite nice. You know, let's say we've covered nutrition with fasting. Look at exercise, stress control, sleep. So Fiona, what from an exercise perspective, how would you answer that?
You definitely need to be considering doing some resistance work to increase muscle mass.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah,
absolutely.
And again, it's been proven in the studies that steady state long cardio fails every time.
Yeah.
When it comes to weight loss.
The big difference is, and I see it time and time again, when people switch this long steady state cardio and switch to resistance work. And it doesn't have to be much, but yeah, definitely some resistance work.
You guys stress sleep?
Yeah, can I just quickly add here from a nutrition point of view, we have again this misconception about low calorie sweeteners, right? What other things can I have instead of having these, and so it's just, you're substituting one problem for another. I would say you just got to watch out for those kinds of things, and the mayhem that it can cause metabolically, and hydration. I think hydration is huge. I don't think we're drinking enough water, and we really need to look at that. And so I always also address that, like, how much water are you drinking based on that person's weight and so on, and what they want to reach as a goal, and adding things to the water. You can actually add these, whether it's lemon or lime or cinnamon, to help kind of accelerate some of the metabolic foods and thermogenesis, right? If you're eating foods that are have high thermogenic potential,
so you burn more,
like chili peppers, coffee.
And it's just a quick tip, because I get a lot of questions like, how much water shall I drink? 2 to 2.5 liters. I always tell them, there's lots of research on it. Some say 8 glasses, some 10, depending on your weight and so on. I always go with the easy way. Just watch, monitor your urine color. That's it. It has to be transparent. It shouldn't be cloudy. It shouldn't be yellowish. You have to monitor it. You have to use the bathroom every 2 to 3 hours with a good amount of urine and clear color urine. So this is the best. And I also give this tip for parents to monitor their children's hydration, because we know children most of the time go dehydrated. You mentioned something. Anyways, I forgot.
Well, I just want to swing it at the pendulum a little bit, because nutrition and exercise gets all the publicity and the media, and it's a huge commercial industry. I've said this before. I think sleep underpins everything else. So if you're well slept, you have a lot more flexibility with your nutrition and your lack of exercise, where it doesn't work the other way around. My clients who are underslept but have on paper good nutrition and exercise well are in far poorer health. And we don't have an excuse anymore, I suppose, because we now have the technology for the biofeedback. We have lots of devices, Oura rings, Whoop straps, Fitbits, Apple Watches. We have the ability to look at things analytically now and, adjust our pre-bed routine or our, implementing mindfulness. changing our training schedule based on that biofeedback. And these are really useful tools, because the mindset is I just need to train harder to lose that weight.
Well, how many people have told us, right, that how come it is when I wake up in the morning, I have a flat stomach, I seem like I weigh way less than when I went to bed the night before. I don't feel puffy, I don't feel bloated, right? So it speaks to the importance of sleep, and we're actually burning while we're sleeping, even through just exhaling carbon dioxide. Yeah.
You're right. I mean, sleep is probably your best weight loss pill. So next question was, speak about hypothyroidism, so low thyroidism and weight loss with regards to functional medicine management of the same. So yeah, I mean, we probably a huge topic also for another day. I think in general, the functional medicine approach to thyroid, having acknowledged that it obviously has an impact on weight, is that it's not about just medicating to replace the lack of thyroid hormone. It's about supporting the thyroid gland to work effectively. And there's all sorts of environmental factors that we take into consideration, from again hormonal impacts to nutritional deficiencies to inflammation and autoimmune disease.
I think we can maybe, if we can just direct this attendee also to the webinar that we did. I'm sure it's still up on
it's on the page.
Our page, and I think it would be really informative.
Yeah. No, true. Question 3, can we as dietitians work virtually and have the same results with our patients, guys? Yes.
Yeah, especially that we mentioned that weight, because obviously there's a connection, and it's always interesting to meet in person. But with the current situation, I mean, we've seen amazing results with online patients. The only thing is that you're not monitoring hands-on the weight. You cannot do the weighing, and probably you can ask them to have their blood work done elsewhere, somewhere else. But
I think that's the important point. I think it's just making sure that the testing happens, and that can happen anywhere, as long as you can directly try to get the right test done.
If this is what they prefer, we have no issues at all, and we have seen amazing results with it. So yeah, definitely.
How do we test inflammatory markers in our bodies? Well, there's a variety of different markers, and often it's a little bit of sort of triangulation. So you're looking at different. There's no one marker, and to be honest, there's a fairly reasonable assumption that if someone has signs of insulin resistance or signs of a fatty liver or defunct kind of lipid profiles, then you can kind of almost use that as a proxy for inflammation. We have tests from the sort of basic, maybe people may have heard of C-reactive protein, through to we can measure oxidative stress in the body, which again is a very good proxy, through to very complex analysis of just the immune system. We don't often go to that extent. We're applying it a lot more nowadays with everything that's going on, not necessarily with weight loss, but there's a variety of different parameters that can be used.
Is fasting good for people who have severe acidity issues? I guess they mean reflux or GERD.
Yeah, I mean, Dr. Farial, do you want to?
I think we'd have to first identify where the acidity is coming from, and if it is, related to what they're eating, I think that would be taken care of probably with the fasting. And it's a little bit more complex, I think, for me to answer. I don't know if you have a simple answer.
Yeah, no, I think there are some people where acidity flares up when they're fasting, but we need to obviously tackle the acidity problem at the same time. That doesn't mean that we don't want that client to ever fast, or that they're not designed to fast. They are. We need to reverse what the underlying problem is that's creating the acidity, which often nowadays we're finding is stress related or just general gut imbalances. But we would need to see the patient to establish what's going on. But on that point, acidity does not need to be a chronic issue, which it is something that a lot of people live with for a number of years and end up taking medications to control it, which unfortunately has probably more downside.
And I think also from a naturopathic point of view, we have a different perspective on acidity. It's not that the person has too much acidity. Often it's that they don't have enough. So they don't have, for example, enough hydrochloric acid, which is required to break down foods. And so we have to also look at that. Is it truly that it's an acid reflux, or is it just that they're not producing enough HCl and they just need some assistance there with digestive juices and things?
I think we should do a session on gut health. You know, everything related to gut health. I think it's about time to do one complete.
We will do for sure. Yeah. I mean, what next question mentioned advice on brisk walking more. I think that the point I suppose I was making was that there are some clients whereby the worst thing that they can do is go and do high intensity stuff or long cardio, and actually the reverse is true. So these are people with the high cortisols or even very low cortisols, essentially underlying adrenal issues which need to recover with, and part of that plan is less intensive exercise. I don't know whether you
Dr. Nas, I have a question. You know, I keep forgetting. I just remembered. I get a lot of questions from patients, from clients doing the intermittent fasting about their medication routine. If they're on certain medications, how do they change that with their, fasting hours? So,
In reality, we get them to keep the same schedule. I mean, bar like a handful of things. I mean, the caveat here is that people who are on insulin or oral hypoglycemic, so medications which reduce the blood sugars for diabetes, there's certain things that we do with them, and we're not advising people like that to go and do long fasts unless consulting a physician. But otherwise, we would get them to keep the same regime. Ultimately, I just don't think that what the content that's within the medication is going to move the needle when it comes to kind of nutrient senses and the beneficial outcomes of the fast. Next question, is yoga a good workout for weight loss for females with polycystic ovarian disease? I think yoga is a very good exercise for everyone, regardless.
For everything,
I think more people need to do yoga and other forms of exercise and mindfulness, etc. Because we're living in a very fast-paced world. Everyone's stressed, and we need to calm down and flip out of the fight or flight state that Dr. Farial used and back into our natural state, which should be rest and digest.
Any other workout for such kind of segment?
I mean, I think Fiona touched on this universally. I don't feel that people do enough resistance.
Training. Resistance. And by that I mean it doesn't necessarily have to be with physical weight. You can use your own body weight. There are an awful lot of exercises that you can do only with your own body, which will create resistance. There are some simple devices as well. You can buy these resistance bands. You can take them with you if you're going away, or staycation at the moment. So there's no excuse to not have equipment. It's very, very easy. I usually
what would you guys say about so I'm getting more
correctly.
Sorry, Dr. Farial.
Sorry, finish. Go ahead. I was just going to ask, what do you guys think about, like, I'm getting more and more into swimming. What would you say about that as a way for helping with resistance and fat loss?
Fiona, what do you think about that? Using swimming as a tool?
Swimming is
more aerobic, I think. I mean,
it's not very. It's good to move. There's not much. There's a bit more resistance, but you're going to have to swim an awful lot. I'm a swimmer. I'm a triathlete. I know. I do 3 sports. I can see the difference between the swimming and the running and the cycling. So it's good. It gets you to move. It's gentle to start, but you really need to be doing other things as well.
And I want to bring you in again at this point, because you, I'm sure you won't mind me bringing this up, is you have your own recent personal experience of when you got into triathlon, you were carrying more weight than you wanted to, and you went down a route that was what was classically considered unconventional to improve your weight? What were the things, the tweaks that you did that helped with that?
Well, I looked at everything. So number one, I looked at my gut health. I identified I had SIBO, so I treated that.
What is SIBO for the audience?
Small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. So my gut function wasn't optimized. So I then worked on optimizing my gut function. I'm menopausal, so I looked at trying to optimize my hormone levels. So I retested those, and I'm on bioidentical hormone replacement therapy. By addressing that, I've managed to balance my hormones out as well, which has made a big difference. I also decided to apply and think of myself as an athlete, and I tracked everything. A little bit excessive, but that's what a lot of the top athletes are doing anyway. And also logging everything, my training, increased my protein, increased the vegetable intake, and took out, I was eating too many nuts. I know, I have to admit it, they're healthy, but I was still eating too many. So it's just being mindful of some things that are healthy, you can still be overdoing it.
Easy peasy. See how easy? Just have
And
to
you look great, by the way, Fiona.
I'm teasing, but yeah, that's why it's so complex. You had to address so many things to get to that stage.
Well, and then that leads us, actually, there's a question on, is fasting appropriate for women in their reproductive years? What do you recommend if fasting results in an altered menstrual cycle? Sorry, my intonation was wrong there. Fasting results in an altered menstrual cycle. From my personal experience, fasting, if taken to too much of a degree, can cause hormonal disruption. But there's always a caveat. It's about balancing the fasting and feasting cycles. And the trap that a lot of people fall into is that, we're not saying do 4 or 5 day fasts every week. These are sort of things that, are to be done a lot less frequently, but they are balanced in between with periods of satiation and the periods of a proper fed state. The problem people have is that they inadvertently don't eat enough during that fed state, and that's where you run into problems. And that's my experience.
I also think, again, distinction between men and women, right? Dr. Naz, I'm sure we would agree here. Our biology is different. If women who are really into this kind of fasting are starting to notice that they're losing their cycle, this is a very bad thing.
Yeah.
So,
and it's not something, I find it's a great intervention to actually improve someone's fertility. Okay, but it's not an intervention that we're doing a week before they go for, to try and have a baby or go for an IVF.
It's got to be at least
for sure. And I also think that we're supposed to be feasting and not feasting at certain times of our cycle. So just leading up to the period, you should be feasting, and after that, leading up to ovulation, you can be fasting. So it's this whole infradian rhythm of women's physiology that is different to men's physiology. And we need to take into account the whole estrogen, progesterone, all of these other things that play a role in relation to the menstrual cycle.
What's for vegetarians best protein diet, Tina?
For vegetarian, best protein diet, protein sources, they mean?
Yeah, probably.
I expect so.
Tons.
Lentils.
We have lentils, chickpeas, we have soybean, we have quinoa, we have all legumes. And it's very important to complement so that we get all the essential amino acids. So have your bowl of rice with your lentils and with a source of vegetables. Have your beans with some rice. This is where we tofu. Yeah, tofu is an excellent source of vegetarian protein.
So there's a lot of sources.
There's a lot. Yeah, definitely there's a lot, and we can play around and create menus that are suitable for the whatever habits they have. And this is one of the also very important points is to tailor the menu or the diet program to fit in their lifestyle and not the other way around. Not that they have to change their life to fit in the foods that are recommended to eat. We have to tailor it. So yeah, there's a lot.
And even culturally, right? So I'm not going to recommend something to somebody that's not normally their a cultural, diet.
Agreed. So, well, it looks like we're coming to a natural end. We've answered the questions. I hope the audience has found it interesting. If anything, if there's a handful of people where we've shifted the way they look at weight loss and changed their paradigm, then for me that's a success. I think the key takeaways for people are that it's not about calories, it's about your hormones. Look after your hormones and your body will take care of your calories. And that, it's a very individualized approach. There's a lot of principles, basic principles actually, when you look at it on paper, that we apply to everyone. Just the way the pendulum swings just depends on what's happening inside that individual. And we base that on testing. And, there really is a kind of role for, accountability for the people during our programs. But it's not just about, whilst our clients are very successful during the programs, the real value is the tools we give them to help them understand their bodies and maintain their weights or the desired weights going forward. And, the attendees have been lucky because they've been let in on a lot of our secrets, which are no longer a secret. And, I hope it will benefit you guys going forward. So we'll be back next month. We look forward to seeing you there. And in the meantime, we're all at DNA Health and Wellness Center based at Jumeirah Al Qasr and at the DIFC in Gate Avenue now. And we look forward to seeing you. If there's any questions or anything you'd like to take up with us in the meantime, also please feel free to reach out to us, either on our personal Instagram or the Instagram of the clinic or on the website. Guys,
Yes,
I'm ready for bed.
Yeah.
You are too. Thanks.
Thank you for the time, everyone.
No, it's been an absolute pleasure, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. To the audience, take care, have a good night, and we'll see you soon.
Bye.